Hello, Claire.
Hello, Andrew.
This is wonderful. It's very rare for a publisher to get this chance to talk to an author at the end of the process of writing a book. And it's even rarer to be sitting in a garden in amongst the trees and by the sea in this space and to have this kind of opportunity. And I don't know what it is, 6-7 years since I met you in a movement context here. And it feels like the beginning of a journey with the book and also the end of part of the journey with having written it. So congratulations, first of all. How does it feel to be an author?
It feels great. It doesn't feel much different. It feels like a nice way to reconcile my mind and the body. Like it feels like it's a way that my body has found a way to connect, where I had to express into words, which I think was missing into my life. So that feels good from that side. So I don't feel like I don't want to use the word proper, like a conventional author in that way. I think it's nearly like being an author is one way to share my work through movement. And it feels important because this is a dominant way of expressing and communicating.
Yes.
But it's not my main way of communicating, if that makes sense.
Exactly. So writing a book and publishing a book brings you really into the world of mind, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Because it is a form of conveying what's in your mind to other people's minds, and yet you work primarily, is it fair to say, would you say with the body as a tool, as a resource for inquiry, something like that?
Yeah, definitely. For me, the body is like a way to feel and know what it's like to exist in the world. In the same way that we like to search and analyze as human, that is part of who we are. That's why we have philosophy, and I feel as if the body is underrated or not so much seen as a tool, that we look so much as a brain, our thinking, and I want, for me, it was just important to see that it can be used in the same way that we use words or thinking, and be linked to that.
And the particular way that you use the body, as it were, or pay attention to the body, is through movement. And do you want to say something for people who don't know you and your work about what kind of movement that is? Because you also, in your background, you have dance, and this is not exactly dance, is it?
No, I've never trained as a dancer or I never had any formal training of any sort. Dance has always been a big part of my life, but I'm always learning on the dance floor. It's been mainly partner dancing and really improvising. I've never been able to learn proper steps. If anything, the rare time I've tried a dance class, I felt totally inept and I couldn't dance, because it's all about steps and choreography. But my body seems to be, what I learned when I started dancing is I was really good at just making things up and coming out more responding to a partner or environment, you could say. And when I discovered later on, I met a movement, and that you could actually have a full conversation with your environment. Well, actually, we're always in conversation. As it was like, suddenly I was told, I could move any way I want, whenever I want, however I want, in a conscious manner, where I was, it was like a liberation, like, so I'm not suddenly it was just like it could open possibilities of being, not just as a movement, as dancing, as we're saying, for a performance, but I guess like the way we're sitting right now, like is movement. The way we're gonna get up, maybe for a walk or to cook our dinners, that's how our body move and was accepted, what we recognize as a human moving or doing certain things. So it's acknowledging that our bodies are always moving, whether we feel very limited and that our body can hardly do anything. We are still in movement. It's part of who we are. Even if we feel our movement are ugly or inappropriate, that is movement. And in a way, for me, that is not right or wrong or bad. And good quality is more a condition we work with. And there's so much you can do within that.
So that means that somebody reading your book doesn't need to have had any sort of training in anything?
No.
But you're kind of talking about daily life movement there, but when I watch you move, and even for the photographs in your book, which are wonderful, they're wonderful, they're not what I would call daily life movement. You might be moving in a way that reminds me of a stick insect or a puppet on strings or something like that. So it's an elaboration of in some sense. It's not just daily life. Is that right?
No, I guess I'm saying that we all have daily life movement in us. So from that stage, we equal in how we can access the practices that I'm offering. But the practices I'm offering is to sort of explore beyond the daily life. And that might include some of the movement I'm inviting might be very simple, but I'm more trying to open people up to see that we tend to move in certain ways and we never explore beyond those shapes, those movements, and how this way of moving we have tells a story about our narrative about being human in this planet, in relation to other beings, our place, how we behave. And by exploring other ways of being, maybe we can start to better understand the bias of this perspective and how we could open other ways of being and understanding on this planet and for ourselves.
Yes. So you're talking about often unconscious ways that we see things and approach the world and approach one another, but also, so that sounds quite mind-based, but also physical habits and gestures and whatever that again we're not aware of, but are just part of how we move around in the world every day, which tell a story of something beyond that, assumptions and prejudices and so on. Is that right?
Yeah, I guess we are all social and cultural beings, so this, what we've accumulated in terms of vocabulary to exist in the world, would have different shape, and some might be overlapping with other people and others will be quite different.
That's a movement vocabulary.
Yeah, movement vocabulary. And this is the condition we're in, but I guess I find this condition can be constraining and can be very much mind-based, like this is the right way to move, so and then the body inside that has its own intelligence that is more connected to something more instinctual and intuitive. And by having this conditioning, we can repress that, because it's like, oh, I can't start suddenly lying on the floor when everybody else isn't. Or we might repress our own needs and desires. And obviously, within that is because we've learned that that's not appropriate or well received. And I'm interested in the book and how we can be more in touch with those needs and desire, but still have consciousness of doing it. Because I think it's all or nothing. It's either we'll repress or we just totally let go. And I think for me, the word feral is often misunderstood as a totally like going into whiteness and not thinking, not understanding. That actually the way I'm using it is with a true awareness and consciousness, which is of what we're doing and impact. But because we have this true understanding, it's more in dialogue into what we need and what's needed.
So we're on to the meaning of this word feral and the connotations of it and so on. And for me, it does mean wildness. And you just used that word. So tell me about the relationship between wildness and what's often called authenticity, and there is authentic movement, obviously. So there is an approach which says we can get underneath our constructed selves to something authentic. Would you say that's feral is a kind of version of that? I mean, I'm a bit suspicious about authentic because it seems to me that I can't be anything but some kind of construction. I can become aware of what I'm doing, but I can't let go of all the social and cultural layering. I can't just start stroking your hair or picking things out of your nose, even if I want to. But yeah, something about authentic and feral connection between them.
Yeah, I guess it is. You can't just start doing weird, random things, but it's nearly understanding. The idea of feral for me has a connection with the authentic, but it's kind of understanding we're part of a bigger ecology, a wider system. So it is more this connection to instinct and intuition, knowing that actually we're a web, interconnected web with nature and other humans. And in a way, we've never fully separated from everyone, even though there is a very strong Western construct that's the case. And we are different beings, that's not to... But there is more of an interconnection that we need to acknowledge. And if we're more in that feeling, then we can learn and feel those other beings, not just humans, because we're very much in the human talking and human world, in our understanding of who we are and what the world is. And I think with feral, I'm including everything else that is on this planet, and how through that you can connect to a more authentic part of yourself, because you are included everything that is connected to you, not just this idea of a human. And that's more truthful to me.
And you're also, I think, including a sense of atmosphere and I mean, so not just plants and animals or whatever, but the feeling of a place, or just the feelings that whatever's arising in this context for you at the moment, is that right? Which could be physical emotions, or it could be some sense of the spiritual, or it could be some arising of eros, or really anything.
Yeah, I guess because we're talking about space and time, as these things keep changing, so things are not fixed. I think it's the idea of things are always in movement. And there might be some repetition within that, but it's like a wave of composition. You know, here we have the sea over there, and I'm aware that the ground is sloping down towards the sea and the wind into a certain direction, and that might make me, we don't have sunshine today, but you know, like sometimes I like to position myself around the sun, and all these elements becomes part of how I situate myself in the world, and we're not so much aware of that, but it's part of our movement vocabulary. And what if we bring those things more to consciousness and start to see that we're constantly in dialogue with this as much as it's in dialogue with us, and it's nearly like we can learn a lot from it if we allow ourselves. But it's a different way of communicating than words, so it does require a bit more yielding into the unknown, and that it has a different quality. And that, I guess, that's what's hard, is to it's not a palpable thing, it's more intangible, and it keeps shifting. But the more you practice it, and the more there is also repetition and a feeling of you can recognize, but it can never be fixed.
Yes. Most of the practices in your book, and it's full of, 100 or so practices, so that things that people can go out and do are practices that one does on one's own. That's right, isn't it? It's so, or in nature, but largely not without another person there. Is that? I'm sure that's deliberate, but tell us about that.
I mean, you could do it with other people together, but the idea is it's really a handbook that I felt people could have and use in their own way, in their own path, at home, so it's also built that you could just dip your toes in it, or go really fully into the journey and do so. Some practice can require much more commitment, and others can can be done in the city because the environment and nature is everywhere, and it's more understanding that they have pros and cons that they give you.
Yeah.
But it's really a book that I wanted people to be able to open any page and just, if they wanted, they could just do a practice and just see for themselves. Because the idea is that I'm making suggestions to think and look at the world, but inviting people to experience that through movement.
Yeah.
To question, I'm inviting people to question the human bias perspective, but not to tell them, oh, you have a human bias perspective. I just want you to go and experience that and find out for yourself what that means. I'm kind of more, not say as a set thing, I kind of feel that's something that needs to be explored, and I'm giving lots of different doors. And some of the practices can sort of overlap or come back to similar theme, but there are lots of different doors to sort of find your own practice within that. And then from that, people might find different ways to do what I'm suggesting. For me, it's not fixing again, it's more like the entry points that can be done in your own time. For people that might never have a chance to do a full workshop with that, how could we still practice that, even if you're not a committed dancer or mover to this practice? How could we be all more conscious of that?
Yes. So, to elaborate a bit on the practices, I know my favourite one, but do you want to tell me one of your favourites, just to give an idea of the kind of thing that you're suggesting that people go and experiment with?
One of my favourite is quite hard, but I think I'll start with one of the first one that I came up with. That I think that is the idea of, as human, we're very much built in a certain way that the head is always the one on top.
This is my favourite one.
I see your favourite one. Yeah. That's good.
So tell us about it.
And so for me, it was just opening up to the idea of what it's like to not move with your head on top, whatever that might look like, and because the head is everything that is to do with thinking, with the idea of a human, with the idea that we are a superior species on this planet. And what does it mean that we take that away slightly, that we move in a different way? In a way, it kind of forces us more into humility, and it's just a pure exploration of it. Basically, is moving without the head on top.
Yeah. Which anyone can do. You can do it in a wheelchair. You can do it if you just had a hip replacement. Anyone can do it.
You could and I build up to it with there's one that's called dropping your head, and just feeling what it's like to drop your head. And another one is, if it's dropping is too hard, you can rest your head onto something, and there is something so powerful about that, about just resting your head, and because it's how much carrying the head all the time, and how much gives a different perspective to what it used to be in a body.
So then, I'm doing that practice, say, and what would you be inviting me would you be inviting me to go away and write things down, or just to know to notice what kind of what would, so I'm doing that. What do you ask me to do then?
I guess I'm just asking you to really feel what it's like to be in this position. And it might be that you feel a lot of discomfort, you hate it, and in itself that's quite interesting. Why is it such a discomfort? But maybe from that you could also see what's different to the normal way of being. Or am I seeing things from a different way, or is it bringing, as I try to not move with my head on top, how does it make me look at the world in a different way, or animate my body? What does it do about my understanding of being human, and opening new avenues to move and new avenues to think? And it might be very uncomfortable to start with, just realizing, I guess to some extent, for some people it might be just realizing how much we're conditioned in moving in certain ways, and how for us moving out of that is actually quite difficult, and having compassion for ourselves with it, but also how not being able to, because it's so difficult for us, does shape our vision of the world and what impact it has, and recognize that limitation, and even if you can't do it, recognize, okay, this is what I'm working with, and I need to acknowledge that.
Yes. So as you're talking, something strikes me. You're an anthropologist by trade, a social anthropologist. And what a social anthropologist does is to go into the field, whatever their field is, and observe and notice and, in a sense, make themselves as inconspicuous as possible. But a word that you use a lot in your book is disruption, and you're talking about disrupting our habits and practices and so on. So it feels to me like you're doing something non-anthropological, because you're kind of going in and you're to mix the metaphors, you're stirring up the pond, or you're disrupting things to see what happens, rather than just quietly observing how you are normally. You're forcing yourself to, or inviting us to do what we would not normally do again and again. Is that right?
Yeah, I think I'm doing that because I feel that otherwise we're not aware that we are in a human bias perspective.
Yeah.
And I would say, although it might look not anthropological, and I think I've grown myself. I mean, anthropology has been a very useful discipline, but I've also grown out of it, and that kept just what is valuable to me. But there is a strong self-reflective practice in anthropology, or your perspective.
Yes. Yeah.
So you're coming because you are the tool for which you receive information. And in a way, I took that a step further. I think there's not enough acknowledgement in anthropology. There is acknowledgement of that bias perspective, but how it's a whole body and how you behave, that is part of it. And I think I'm taking that a real step further. And that's why we need to I wanted people to bring disruption to your movement, because that's how you can really feel the difference. It's nearly otherwise we're so used to it, we're so in the conditioning that we can't even see it's conditioning. So, which is why it's hard. So, as an anthropologist, it's easier because we work human to human. So we're like, oh, I can see what culture is different from mine. I don't do it that way. But beyond the human, we're so comfortable with the human and us as being this superior species. We don't want the reality of that other beings that we have something to learn from, because it's been a narrative that's been so strong for so long. I mean, obviously there are cultures that still have some of this quality of being connected with the environment. I personally believe our ancestor had that. I don't know to which level, but we colonize ourselves so much over the years that we don't even know where it is, where it's come from. And I guess my book somehow is about refinding that intelligence and that knowledge that we've lost. So rather than go and find it in another culture which has its own problem of reappropriation, is how can we learn to connect to that body wisdom that our ancestors have, that other cultures have, and develop that ourselves.
Yeah.
And have different narratives of who we are, because the narrative we have are not right in terms of opposition as, we can take whatever we want and do whatever we want.
Yeah.
But that needs to start with recognizing that our perspective is biased, and so the narratives that come from that are biased, and learn from other beings on this planet.
Yeah.
And it means developing other ways of knowing and communicating that are not words, and that's why it's so difficult for us, because that's what we know, and that's why the body is I believe the entry point into this. Yeah.
It also, as you're talking again, it occurs to me you're also a filmmaker by trade, and you've in the book is full of stories that you write, often tell about your having regularly been into the Hackney Marshes to move as part of your regular practice, and you've been filmed while you're doing that. And so a question that occurs to me is that, as well as your own experience of what it's like to disrupt your movement habits by going out, in that case, amongst the plants of Hackney Marshes and moving, and experiencing what it's like for you when you disrupt your habits, is there then a second disruption when you come back and watch the film? Do you find watching yourself on film moving that you have more, oh, I look like that, oh, I do that? Is there a kind of double layer of that? And if so, would that mean that there might be a merit for people who are doing these practices to plonk their phone on a tree and film themselves while they're doing it? Or I've not thought of this before.
I guess if you're new to that, it will be useful, because it's another way to see yourself and to bring consciousness to it. I think because I have such a long practice, and then a practice of learning to remember your movement and what you've done, and feeling and maybe jotting notes down. And the book is full of diary entry from me writing after which I never intended to publish. It just came as an afterthought, and then it just felt so natural and obvious they should be in the book.
And they're great. They really help the book. Not that it needs help, but they tell the story. Yeah,
they tell another story. Or at least I wanted the book to be my perspective, to be quite obvious. Like, this is my perspective, and also. I said a little bit at the beginning in the book, like, other perspectives are welcome to challenge and bring other, mine is not enough. It's just one way to frame. Like, as a filmmaker, I have one way to frame our conversation right now. So that's quite important to understand that, and I wanted to make it obvious. It's not the right way, it's just my way, and it's just an entry point for other people to hopefully find their own way by understanding my way. But to come back to the idea of the film, I've developed such a good practice through those entry diaries and all of that to remember, and then watching back the film you remember, oh yeah, that's what happened and all of that. So it's not like a massive further disruption, because I've been working with that. But I guess for people that are more new to this work, it might help to bring another layer of it, bring more the more we bring all of this into consciousness, and the more you can work with it. And I guess what more I'm doing is I've been building a full screen installation with Dominic, that people can come and see and experience what it's like for me to be in nature in this way. And it's been beautiful, the feedback we've been having, and how people first And sometimes it's beautiful, and sometimes it's been very challenging. My movement is very challenging for people, but it's not done on purpose to provoke. It's just because I'm really fully in the environment and in the moment, and that can be quite feral and not what someone expects to see. But what they can really see is that I'm not trying to be interesting. I'm just in the landscape as part of it. And also the landscape can be quite bleak at times, nothing, because it's in the city, so there is that film that the romanticization is totally taken away. So it can be challenging in that way. At the same time, that's what brings the beauty, is the beauty from not trying to be beautiful, but really being fully with the environment. So for me, the disruptions come more from that, from wanting to be it as it is. I mean, obviously I still curate how those images come, but without filter. And it's quite hard with filmmaking because there's so much filtering and planning. This is how it should go. And it's not to say that there hasn't been some sort of curating, as I say, for images, but a lot of it has been quite organic. It's more like we've got so much footage, we can't show everything. So it's been more hard to pull it, that it's... And if anything, people are like, oh, there is too much. Like, they want a story, and we didn't give them a story, and there's so much to see. But that's the point. Like, when you're in nature, you constantly... There's always information everywhere. You can never fully choose all of them, but it's more, how do you keep awareness to all of these things and not just always an awareness, and be aware of your selection. Oh, I'm selecting that now, but I know I am. That's the difference to I'm just selecting that and I'm pretend that's the truth.
You talk about not trying to be interesting there, which is already an interesting thing to say. But I'm wondering, one of your practices is to durational, to move even up to 24 hours or whatever in a place, or to go back to the same place repeatedly. Do you ever get bored?
Oh my God, no! It's the opposite. Is like me and Dominic can't stop going to the marshes. It's like the more you go to a place, and the more it's like home. The more there's things to see, the more. And although there is a sense that other things repeat in nature, but actually they do and they don't. There is always, you're like, and you get excited. Oh, it's the time when the core parsley is growing and all of that. And even if they do, like, there might be more or less, or something's changed, and you can really notice the effect of the weather, whether if it's rained more or less, and in itself it's fascinating because it's always, you know, it's going to happen, but it's always a spectacle. You're not quite sure exactly what it's going to be like, and you forget. It's like everywhere it's just like, oh, it's a time when the grass is going to be really high, but it's really hard to imagine when it's there, and then suddenly it's going to be there, and you're like, you kind of forget, and then because you're in winter and it's cold, and then when it's summer, and it's fascinating. And the more you're in a place, and the more you see detail, and the more the landscape gives you, and the more, that's what I feel our ancestors really had that knowledge, because they were constantly with the landscape. And it's not hard. Everybody can do it. It's more that it requires to just be with it. And if we really give it that time, it's so generous, so generous.
So what about the whole second part of your book is about moving in the environment, being environment. The first part, I think you could do all of the practices outdoors, but you don't need to. So, I mean, if you're moving in a hall or a studio or in your apartment or whatever, do you then ever get bored or think, why am I doing this? Or I'd rather go and have a cup of coffee and talk to a friend? Or how do you... Is there ever a sense of needing to sustain your interest, or do you just find whatever you're doing interesting enough in its own right?
I do, and I think when we don't, it's more that we doubt ourselves of there is value in what we're doing. And I guess it's hard because we're in a society that that doesn't teach us to value what we're doing in that way. such strong value on what's valuable and what's not.
Well, you need a product, don't you? And there's no product to movement, really, unless it's filmed, in which case you've got to film. But half an hour's movement doesn't give you a painting or a sculpture it's gone.
But even when you move, like certain people can have expectation, especially when they first come to a movement class, or like, oh, that's the way to move, or I need to impress, I need to do something. That it could be like more you're just moving a little finger, but you're just so with it, and you give value to that.
Yeah.
But there is a bit like, oh, my movement is not interesting. So you say you're not feeling it, you're not with it. That if you're just like, not saying, oh, it's interesting, it's just like, oh, I'm really present with that finger moving and how it's rippling through my body, and just the fact of being in that moment with myself, and especially in the world we're in, it's like a gift, I believe. But it for people, sometimes it's hard for themselves to give themselves that gift. And when they do, it's beautiful. You can see the sense of release that gets from it. But it's like we've been taught since children that it's not okay we to do that. And a lot of the work when I'm teaching is I feel I'm just creating a place where I'm allowing others just to move the way they need.
Yeah.
And it's such a beautiful gift. Yeah.
As you talk there, and just watching you start to move, I'm thinking about self-consciousness, and I was thinking about it before when you were talking about the film installation, and I wonder when you see yourself moving on film, do you ever have that sense that many people have? You know, they hear their voice. In the old days, it was on the answering machine, but they hear their spoken voice and they go, oh, I hate my voice. Or they see themselves in a picture and the first thing they say is, oh, I look fat, or I look stupid. Or we have these such strong judgments about how we sound, how we look, when you watch yourself moving, do you ever think, oh God, or have you, and did you ever, and is that something you've been able to leave behind? Because I'm thinking about feral suggests not I don't imagine that a wild animal ever thinks, God, I look stupid like this. So yes,
I definitely used to, and I remember my dad trying to film us with my sister when we were teenagers, like, no, yeah, like, but as I did the filming with movement, it become, or even I reflected a lot when everyone went on Zoom and all of that, and everybody hated watching the images, and for me, I was, as much as you could say, yeah, oh, it's so narcissistic or whatever all the problem people had with it, or I'm so obsessed about my own image. I also felt, oh, it's a nice way to practice self-love. I mean, to reverse it on its, but in my own practice, when I do a film, it's more like, as you see, like, I see myself just as part of a landscape or another tree, like, I'm just doing what I'm doing. And I do choose the images and the photos, but mainly my concern is with the message of, like, that it's seen clearly what's happening. Yeah. You know, a lot of it could be that there's too much movement, although we do keep movement with Dominique, or the lighting is not very good, or like suddenly it cuts or whatever. So, but there is nothing that I'd be happy for everyone to see any of the footage that I've done. Like, there is no or two, and
that's quite remarkable.
And it's rare that I think, because people say, oh, yeah, I like what you're wearing. I say, well, it's just what I normally wear. I mean, what I more think about is comfort, but all of my clothing, because I love movement so much, I need trousers. I can't have trousers that are too tight, that I need trousers that I can move in. So all of my clothing is clothing that I like to move in, to do movement. The only consideration is when it's cold or wet, so I will wear waterproof because I don't want to get wet. But otherwise I don't mind that too much. I don't mind my hair to go all over, and I guess I tend not to wear my glasses, mainly because I like to be able to move on the ground. Yeah, but it's something I feel quite strongly, like it's just me as it is. There is no filter.
Yes. I'm thinking as you talk about clothing and moving, my experience of you working with this idea of feral was that you started working in the woods and made a film about, I don't know what you called it in the end, about being feral, in which you were, I think, almost or perhaps completely naked. And that's not what this book is about. But I'm wondering about, so the wood for some people, for me probably, be an idea of feral being, in the old days we might have said primitive, but somehow completely back to nature with shedding our human clothes and everything. But the book doesn't talk about that. Is anything you want to say about that kind of wild in the woods feral, compared to in the book that feral can be just lying on the bonnet of a car or doing not very wild things in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's my own journey with connecting to my own feral and my own story. And my own story has got a lot to do with being in the underground. And that felt quite appropriate. And I guess for...
What do you mean being in the underground?
I guess being my own journey of being more with darkness and the world of the underground.
Yeah.
And I guess finding it hard to be fully alive. But getting a lot of wisdom from that journey, but it's been very much down in the underground kind of journey. So I think that piece that I made was more metaphorical in that sense of more exploring that world of the underground. And it felt like clothing is too much being in the normal world. And it felt like being naked, I had clay all over in a forest with leaves, felt just, I was more in a dream world there, connecting with feral from a dream. But the feral that I've been exploring in the book, and I explore with my art practice and installation, is the feral of, as human, that's why I love the word feral, because it's that limbo situation between culture and nature, between the wild and culture. And it is, we don't know how to exist, but it is, I'm saying there is potential going a bit deeper with that wild side that we have of us, but we can't ignore the fact that we're part of this civilization and technology. And I'm not someone that don't want to talk about technology. A chapter of my book does address that. Yeah. So for me, and that's why I wanted to have normal clothing, because it's like I'm exploring feral as a normal human being in this world. And there is, being feral, one of the limits I found is that it's so cold, I need clothing, and it is my limit. And even I'm a Mediterranean girl, so obviously it's harder for me, but even people in the UK that have a big tolerance for cold weather wouldn't be able to be just naked moving around for a long time, it's just recognizing those limits. It's part of being feral. We don't need to be what I don't want is so much stereotype of what it means to be feral. And it's okay to go in the dream world like I did, but I think here it's about more being into the reality of what it means to be feral, and just not thinking we have to choose one or the other.
Do you encourage people to move with their eyes open or closed?
Mostly open, yeah.
Why?
Because having your eyes closed can be connecting too much to your inner world and yourself, and it might not help with connecting with the outside world. Obviously, I'm encouraging. The problem with vision is it goes into mind and what we're thinking, and I'm looking at all of that. So it's more about teaching people how to to look or have a soft gaze or look at people, not just be like, let the movement have it in its own speaking rather than just the eyes dominating, and help people to feel that the other sense are present. They're always present, but I think we have more an awareness that vision is our main modality of what we see. So we remember more the visual rather than the feeling on our skin. But I'm trying more to say people to tune down their vision and to use different parts of the vision.
Yeah. I want to go back a bit to your talking about the body as a tool of inquiry and becoming aware of our biases and prejudices and perspectives and conditioning and all of those things. And somewhere, I think maybe on the back of the book, I'm not sure, you talk about refashioning ourselves. So there's an extra step, isn't there? I'm interested in the anthropological inquiry into self, and then there's a point, I imagine. Have you found a point where you notice this and you notice this and you become aware of that and you think, I want to change it? And then does there become a new objective beyond just noticing to trying to refashion, reshape? And is that in the book?
No, the refashioning is not in the book. But we had an interesting conversation last night with, well, it was Christina mainly, but Keith was part of it. But basically, I guess the idea where Christina was saying that she wanted us to have different cosmology, different idea of where we come from, story of where we come from. And I say, yeah, I agree with you, like the narrative that we have as human of what is the human species and how we dominate this planet and is not appropriate. But I was saying, but it needs to start from understanding that our perspective is biased, and then like it needs. So I'm kind of saying feral is the step towards us. It's nearly like what? Well, I'll take a step back, but there is possibility that we can't imagine of what it means to be human that are not in our sphere, because there's things we know we don't know, and there's things we don't know we don't know. And it's nearly like I want us to open to what we don't know. And with that, it's like we can't yet imagine what we could become or what we are already. And we have certain story of where we are that are quite fixed, and I'd like us to open up to other ways of being that are maybe less palpable, but it requires a different way of sensing them and feeling that, which requires to be more connected to our bodies and nature, the environment. So I guess, although the book is not about refashioning ourselves, it's the first step is understanding that we have fashioned ourselves in a certain way and we're a bit stuck in it. And it's kind of saying where we can wear different clothes, it's possible. But it's not that easy, that's the truth, because it's quite strong. And a lot of people would be extremely resistant to against it. And it's not easy, because it's not easy to look at your habits to say, fuck, I do that every day and I'm stuck in it and I want to change it and I can't. And it's not that easy. But it's nearly, I don't think we have another choice. I think that's what we need to be doing. I really strongly feel that we need to bring more consciousness to that. And there is light at the end of a tunnel. And there's light in the little details. That is also because our culture and our way of seeing the world is so goal-orientated that we can't see actually there is so much pleasure in little things.
There's an obvious connection here with the even bigger context of climate change and nature loss and so on. And I don't want to go into that too far, but as a much younger than me person living in a world that's visibly crumbling around us, I don't know if you have hope and where you find hope, but do you think that in what you're talking about here, both in terms of how we see ourselves and how we find ourselves in relation to nature, that do you find some hope or glimmer of hope that if this way of refashioning our relationship with the world and reimagining our cosmology could be the beginnings of some way through the mess that we're collectively in?
I certainly feel it could be, but at the same time, I have no idea. We might very much destroy ourselves. And let alone climate change, it might be with AI, I don't know. I mean, right now it's... what I can say for sure is I can see the potential that we could be so much more. But I can see both equally possible, and I have no idea which way it's going to go. And maybe, to some extent, I mean, I don't have a preference. It's more that I feel like, you know, there is a cycle of life and death for everything. And I don't know how long does the human species will be alive. I don't know. And maybe our time will come at some point. And maybe it'll be in 3 million years and we will have a wonderful go, or in 10 million, I don't know, or in 3,000 years or 300 years. But all I'm saying is that everything goes at some point or another. And maybe it'll be... That doesn't mean I want human to die or human species to disappear. But certainly what I've learned from nature is that death will come at some point. And it also brings space for the new life to come. And for me, I don't want to be holding on to... If our time is up and we need to go, I believe something else will come. And I believe it'll be selfish of me to think that, the human is to stay as they are. And it's also an idea of that. So I don't know, I feel as if I'd like us to let go a bit of this idea of who we are, because then it means that we could become something more, or that can morph more with the time and what is needed, or that maybe we need to let go of us as such life, and maybe something else can come. And I guess if you believe in what life is and there is a cycle, maybe you don't really fully disappear, you're just part of the next life. But
yeah.
So I'd like to be part of those that can bring a message in other ways possible. But I certainly feel that even going that way is a hard path to walk and requires is quite confronting. But that's what I want to be doing, and that's what I've done with the book. And but it's out of my hands what will happen. But it requires everyone to just, come into the pot as an individual. It's limited what it can do.
And an element in that is the human, isn't it? So coming back to the book, and as we were saying earlier, the first bit of the book is really about practices that I can do on my own anywhere, which are kind of really focused on me and my experience and my movement as I read it. The second part is about taking that, if you weren't already, out into nature, into the environment, and exploring oneself, one's movement as part of all of this. I suppose that the next book might take this practice on to exploring the feral in relationship, in human relationship. Does that feel like the next step?
I think it feels the next step. I think it's already happening, but it's at a more embryonic level at the moment, more me experimenting with movement classes, but it feels that's what's happening. Yeah, the next step is the human to human, which is in a way the hardest part. But it feels that's what it's needed, because if we don't manage to find a way to come more together at a level, I feel like I'm bringing the non-human, not that I've brought knowledge, but like that kind of more subtlety of what the non-human is teaching me. If we can bring more of that to that human level of when we come into contact, bring more consciousness to the way we communicate and connect with each other. Yeah, just that.
That could be transformative.
I think so, but it's a lot of work. But I think that's the next level.
You were talking earlier about conscious interbeing. Is that right? Yeah. Is that what you mean? Is that a way of saying what you're just talking about?
I mean, that's what I mean. That's the term I'm using at the moment for this class that I've started, but whether that will stay that way, I don't know. I'm still, as I say, it's still embryonic ideas that I'm exploring with. I feel the way we connect with each other, there is so much unconsciousness in how we come into contact. And it's not to say, I mean, I've done it as much as everyone else. Like, we're constantly violating others and violating ourselves at a subtle level, because of programming, because of how we had to deal with.
That's a really strong word, violating.
I know. But I mean, I guess in the sense of we're not listening to ourselves and listening to the other, because like if it's a form of violation that we're not aware of, I think. But we do it. We're both doing that to each other and to oneself. So that's why it doesn't. And at times it might feel like, someone is doing it more explicitly to the other, but it's also, and it's not to blame individuals. It's the whole system that is to blame and the way we've been brought up. And here again is conditioning.
Do you have a sense of a positive side of that? So as well as feeling that we're constantly violating one another, do you also have a sense at times that we are, or at least some of us, are nurturing one another or healing one another or bringing love or blossoming to one another? Or does it really is what you're most aware of the sense of violation? I
mean, we can, and there is a lot of it, but if it can be with intention of love and nurturing, you can actually end up violating someone. So it's complex, and it's not to blame. It's and someone that have, and at the same time, it's complex because then now it feels more normal that people have strong body. No, I don't want that. But that even in itself is problematic because it's also disconnecting ourselves from our need for connection and desire to connect, which come from a real need that, needs can be met in a society in that way. But I kind of feel as it's nearly like I want us to be more aware that we're violating ourselves and each other, but also we have a strong desire to connect, and we need that. We need each other. So it's like, I'm not saying we should move more away from each other, and it's not. It's more like, how can we come more with awareness of those violations and then find ways to move around them, to connect in ways that maybe we didn't expect, because we keep trying to connect in ways that we know without realizing there's other ways to connect because we're not really listening.
Yes. And So if I think about that and how to become aware, for example, just in this little bit of interbeing between you and me, in order to regulate, to become aware of and regulate myself, my behaviour, how I am, so that I'm not violating you and not opening myself to being violated by you, is where do you suggest starting? Is the main work simply in becoming more aware of myself and what's going on for me, or is the main work somehow to do with attuning to you so that I can have a sense of how the world is for you, or both of those things, neither of those things? Where does this work start?
Yeah, you need both of those things, but obviously they can be tricky because I think we can often have idea of what we need, but actually they're not really what we need. They're what we think we need. And we can have idea about what the other needs, but that can be our projections. And I think it's taken me all my life to know what I need, what I didn't need, what my needs were. And I was really confused because compared to people that seem to have a very clear idea of what they needed, I never felt, I really know what I need. But it's also because I just genuinely didn't know. And then it has become clearer. And so there is a lot of it is not knowing what we need, not being connected to our bodies, not being connected. And I think being more aware of our conditioning and the way we're limited and allowing ourselves more to feel that connection with nature, or to feel that feral self, is one way to be more aware of those things, because we're repressing them. So when there is layers and layers of repression and we're never really listening to this feral side self, or so those needs are constantly. And depending on people, it might be very difficult because they feel strongly, no, this is how I am to be human. What do you mean I need to, it can be very shocking to feel, but their body actually is crying for something more. And that reconciliating the two can be quite, there is that. And then there is the fact that another being is going through the same difficulties. And then how do they mean? Because if you meet a level, it's just your conditioning meeting, but there's all those layers that are constantly subconsciously present, and you're not in yourself in denial about they're there, then that's quite difficult. So that, but it can also be very simple, I think, and liberating to let ourselves just do that. And a lot of it is if just other people are doing it themselves. And that's what I've observed. By being just myself, more feral, it just allowed people to be more feral. Because that's how we learn how to condition ourselves. It's like we've learned, I can't be that way. So you've learned the conditioning. And that's also how we can unlearn it. Yeah. As a ripple, it can be the more other bodies, and we can all feel it, if other bodies are allowing themselves to unpeel certain layers, it really has a rippling effect on others. So the more we collectively do this, so it's not just individual.
Yes. So I've got as you talk there, I've got a question about how do I know. So you were saying there about coming to know what it is that we need. And before we come to know what we need, we may think we know what we need, but it turns out we're wrong. How do you know when you're right? How do you know that you're not in 10 years' time going to look back and say, I thought I knew what I needed then, but...
Well, I think you first you have to accept that it's not fixed. It keeps changing, like the weather. I mean, it's more. It's not like yeah. I mean, it's first it's getting a deeper understanding of who I am, and I don't need to do those things. I don't need to. That I think I needed to do. It's like more following your line of movement, or like, and just. It's hard to tell because it is a bit of following your intuition and then constantly reassessing things as they come towards you. Is that what I need? Like, it's nearly like constantly reassessing. Do I need this? It's like constant exercising muscle and not being scared to get it wrong. Like, I think I didn't need to do that today, but I still did it, and I did, and it's okay. You know, I think there is a constant, and the more you exercise that muscle, and the more you tend to attract what you need. You'll attract more of the right people, the right atmosphere, the right being, and the more you kind of able to ride the waves and be with the movement of things. Because what you need is here again is an understanding of us and our identity as quite fixed compared to what's around us. So we are, the more we understand what you need, and the more we can also open to being with others, and not just humans, but like, I mean, obviously a human is very important, and that it's not just about you as well, because there can be a danger of what I need is me against other, and it's the more you're comfortable in your own skin and with that sense, the more you can also feel you can connect with other in a way that feels more authentic, and the more you can take over things from other, because if you know that the other is truly listening to you in a way that is not going to violate you, you're more likely to be truly yourself with them and expressing your needs. So there is a mirroring effect in that. Obviously you need to, I guess, we need that, finding others that can support us in that growth. And if we don't have that, then that's when we create strong boundaries. No, I don't want that. Because you know you're not going to be. But the more you have others that respect that, and the more you can breathe into what you need, because in a way that become less, it doesn't need to be so fixed, because you know that there's going to be a great lessening on the other side.
There's an important element of trust in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
Trust in oneself
and the other, because there is another layer. So there's two layers.
When you're talking there, when you talked about following your line in movement, a question that often arises for me when I'm invited to follow my line in movement is, which line? And then if I try and unpick that, I find that my different internal characters have different lines. So to caricature it, my little boy might be inclined to do this, my sort of thinky publisher type person might be wanting to do this, my wanting to be wild in the woods writer might be. So I have have an internal cast of characters, and different ones of them have different lines at different times. In your exploration of being feral, do you find different Claires who have different needs and different approaches and everything, or do you? I'm not saying you come back to a fixed and determined sense of self, but do you tend to find your an identity or a multiple identity?
Yeah, I don't really get. I mean, when I'm purely feral, it's nearly the idea of me, of identities, is not so important.
They fall away
Yeah, I'm purely in the moment, and in the moment, it's quite a spontaneous way of being. That feel is not like all these different beings that I've been creating all over my life to create a sense of safety and survival. It's nearly like all these voices just like kind of fade away, and I don't need to choose all of them. I can just more be with, and it's not just about me, it's all the things that are around me, and how the wind moving, these flowers, it feels less, it's less, I'm not even sure, did I decide to do this? Did something, what it becomes less important.
And is that I that you're left with, that you're just talking about, is that a Claire that you can take to work with, or go and visit your family as, or is it do you have to put back on social armour or clothing or whatever?
I wish I could take that being to everything I do, and I think I aspire to that, but I think I'm not anywhere at that level, especially with family.
Well, that's always the hardest, isn't it?
But I guess I aspire to that, but that's extremely hard. But yeah, and it's definitely, compared to what it used to be, it's definitely much better. But with what I experienced when I'm in nature with being feral, I experienced what it could be like with everything. And in a way, that's why I've extended to the human, because I feel, okay, now I need to go beyond just my movement spot, being feral, and how can I expand all of this to all of life? And it's a big job. I don't know. But I can't, it's hard to bring consciousness to all of that. Even right now, as we're talking, and we're more in the talking mode. Or if we're doing it outdoors, is helpful. Yeah.
It is a big job.
It is a big job, right? And I think spending time with the right people, like I found more and more over the years, being able to find people that really nurture side of myself, that are blossoming, that can blossom, that has been important. Which is not to say that I can't exist with other relationship. If anything, I feel stronger with being able to deal with relationship, but making sure those relationships are really present in my life, because they're one that really blossoming a certain way of interacting, because we need others. Yeah. And so it's kind of, I think I'm just learning how to go from one step to the next, to go, because it's not like you can jump from one thing to the next level so easily. Or
on that note, I'm starting to get cold.
Yeah, I was. Yeah.
I'm going to say thank you very much, and thank you for a wonderful book, which every time I read it, I get more ideas and more inspiration from. And I deeply recommend How to Be Feral to everybody. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Andrew. Thank you for your delightful questions and enthusiasm.